Well, first of all, a simple question. Do you believe that Yevgeny Prigozhin is dead?
On the balance of probabilities, yes, I do. We still have to keep this little sort of devil on your shoulder saying in the back in your ear that we've only had this being said from Russian official channels, and Russian official channels are known for their disinformation. But it is more likely than not that Prigozhin is dead because of this.
And we've certainly seen some statements being made from people representing the Wagner Group saying this, that he and his deputy and security chief were on this plane. That is the key thing. And in terms of any evidence, what we have of why that plane came down, we're showing some footage right now of someone videoed this plane coming down. You see the big, literally just plummeting to the ground, the crash site. That's been verified at least. Do we have any idea yet, any inkling of what the cause was?
Again, no official inkling. There's a lot of chatter on Telegram. There was a lot of chatter just after the plane crashed, and video appeared of supposed explosions in the area of where the plane was in the sky, and then we saw that video of the plane spiraling down to the ground. So there is very real speculation, and it is, I'd say, it's more than a possibility that the aircraft were shot down. This is Vladimir Putin getting rid of a problem, having spent some time trying to detangle it from his wider political network and criminal network across the world, and then sending a very clear message to anyone else that would be wanting to oppose him or potentially stand against him in his presidential elections next year.
Well, indeed, with the timing 60 days on from that attempted coup attempt, when we saw Wagner and his army get within a couple of hours of Moscow and then suddenly standing down. He then went off, part of a deal brokered by the Belarusian president, we were told, exile in Belarus. We didn't see him for a bit. Some people were saying he'd already been killed or was in a cell underneath the Kremlin being tortured. Goodness knows what. And again, I'm not sure anyone would have cried any tears for that. And then he popped up again, and he's been around about. He's attended this BRICS summit in South Africa, something which Putin couldn't do, not risking leaving the country, going there and only appearing by video. Look, a lot of us were just very surprised that he had survived so long, given that anyone who comes up against Vladimir Putin finds themselves behind bars, poisoned, falling out of a balcony, a car crash or a plane crash. This is part of his modus operandi. Why do you think, if this is an assassination by Vladimir Putin on his orders, why do you think he survived so long? Why 60 days? Why was he not just got rid of within a matter of hours or days of that attempted coup?
Yeah, I think it shows the entanglement of the Wagner Group throughout Russian international politics and the financing behind the Wagner Group, and that link into the wider number of oligarchs in Putin's inner circle and to Vladimir Putin himself. Ukraine was almost a distraction for Wagner. Wagner's big influence is in Africa. And it's controlling a number of countries that are very unstable, so that they can gain access to gold, diamonds, hardwood, and in North Africa, oil. And it's a lot of that's financing what's going on inside Moscow and financing privately the oligarchs and Putin himself. And Putin had built up this personal relationship with Prigozhin, so would have been upset with him. And the whole rot, I think, started before the coup, whenever Prigozhin was being overly critical of the Russian Defense Minister Shoigu and General Gerasimov in charge of operations into Ukraine. But he was implying that he had wider political ambitions and potentially wanted to take over from Putin. Now, we've got the Russian presidential elections next year. Putin doesn't want any opposition. Navalny had Novichok in his underpants and is now in prison. Wagner, Prigozhin has now fallen out of the sky. This is not an unusual tactic by Vladimir Putin. This
is what happens. I mean, this thing is, it's extraordinary when you actually think about how significant this man has been. He's a criminal, got out of jail, became a hot dog seller in Moscow, and then became a private chef to Vladimir Putin. The next thing you know, he's a multi-millionaire military mercenary chief, waging horrific war in Ukraine. We know he's been responsible for some of the worst atrocities, he and his men. I mean, lots of violent criminals that he recruited directly from prison to fight in Ukraine and fight for his mercenary forces. There will be no tears shed in Ukraine for this man, will there?
No, none whatsoever. I think there'll be a lot of nervousness around Russia because, we've got this armed group that is now leaderless. Some of them will still be loyal to Prigozhin. He, certainly in a lot of the videos that he was putting out was showing greater care for the criminals that he had under his command than the Russians are showing for their soldiers under their command. And therefore there'll be that degree of loyalty. And it's not just at the foot soldier level who could cause problems. At the higher level, we've got General Surovikin, who was the commander of the Russian Air Force until yesterday when he was sacked. We haven't seen him since the attempted coup. He was very closely linked to Prigozhin in Syria and in Ukraine. And if you've got that level of support that's within the Russian society and the higher echelons of Russia, there's still potential danger for Vladimir Putin.
Yeah, I mean, that's the thing, isn't there? Do you think that overall, with post that coup, and now it would appear Prigozhin dead again? The whole thing may have been a decoy. He may not have been on that plane. He's disappeared somewhere. Probably not his style. He could be being, tortured in a cell right now by Vladimir Putin's henchmen. The whole thing was being faked. We don't know. But if he is dead, does that mean that Vladimir Putin is stronger now or weaker?
No, I think the whole incident has weakened Vladimir Putin, and I think overall, from last year, including the coup bit, Putin's position is in a much weaker place.
I mean, the Russian military just basically stood aside when Wagner started marching towards Moscow. That was a bit of a giveaway, wasn't it?
Well, it's the Russian military and their internal security piece. The other person that has disappeared is Nikolai Patrushev. Now, Patrushev is the chairman of the Russian Security Council. He's a former head of the FSB. He is Putin's right-hand man, is the one that's been continuously whispering in his ear and briefing him on what's going on. And he's been the one that's been allowed at the other end, the Putin end of that very long table, to sit and whisper in his ear as to what's going on. We haven't seen him since the coup, and there's a lot of other key individuals that we haven't seen since the coup. So there's a lot going on in Moscow. There's a lot of politics happening there, and I think Putin is not in a stronger position.
Can I ask you just one final question, actually, in relation to what's happening in America? Donald Trump didn't appear at that Republican primary debate, but he did an interview with Tucker Carlson instead. We're going to talk about that in the next 20 minutes or so. Got some clips of what he had to say. But he's talked about Ukraine, and we've said again and again that if it were up to him, the Ukraine war, if he was in president, the Ukraine war would never have happened, but he would end the Ukraine war straight away. Now, the only way of ending that war in Ukraine is basically stop giving aid to the Ukrainians and allowing the Russians to win, isn't it? What concern is there about a Trump presidency on that front?
Well, if you stop giving aid to the Ukrainians and the Russians would continue it for a longer period of time and expand it potentially outside the borders. The only way to stop it quickly would be to get Russia to pull out. But Trump does not have that level of power. It is probably. It is highly probable that Putin has got something over Trump and has an ability to influence his thinking in many ways. But Trump just wants to big it up. All he wants to do is say what he says. He doesn't have any substance behind it. OK, thanks.
Great to talk to you. Philip Ingram, former senior military intelligence officer. Quick word from Candice Holdsworth. Just going back to Prigozhin, likelihood of him being dead. If again, it's interesting to have someone, an analyst like Philip, saying, on the balance of probabilities, he's dead. On the balance of probabilities, Putin's hand is behind this as well. Would you agree?
Yes, it sounds credible. All I can think, though, is what a full-on gangster state Russia is.
It's a mafia state.
It is, completely. And they also support corrupt regimes abroad, so they just export all their chaos. I mean, when Prigozhin is seen as someone who could replace Vladimir Putin, I mean, wow, that is from the frying pan into the fire.
Yeah.
I mean, that's a terrifying situation to be in if he had come anywhere near power.
Yeah, that's a lot of people were saying, let's get rid of Putin, anything's better. No, it could be a lot worse than Vladimir Putin, which is saying something.
Which is saying something.
Indeed.